You all gave rave reviews on our 10 out of the box marketing tips to try in 2023 roundup episode we published at the end of last year. So, for the next few weeks, we're taking a break from airing new interviews to bring back underrated gems from our guests. We've compiled the best of pitching, lead generation, conversions, and customer feedback advice into 4 themed roundups. This first roundup features 10 must try pitching tips. I'll introduce each soundbite with the name of the guest and the original episode number and title it was pulled from, in case you want to go back and listen to the full conversation. The links to all referenced episodes will also be listed for you below in the show notes. All right, so tip number 1 is actually from me, your host, Ellen Yin, in episode 141. Include this one easy thing in your next podcast pitch to guarantee a response. Here's this quick tip for you. And I know when you guys hear this, you're going to think, wow, this is so simple and obvious and easy. Are we really sure more people aren't doing this? And I'm here to tell you, yes. Like, I can literally count on both my hands, which, only got 10 fingers. I can literally count on both hands the number of times over the last 3 years that a podcast pitch has actually included this very simple, but just, super standout detail. And here's what it is. Next time you send out your podcast pitch, I want you to go to the show's page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because those are the 2 biggest podcast players in our industry, and literally take, 30 seconds to leave a positive review for their show, a 5-star rating, a positive review. Go ahead and screenshot your review. And here's a pro tip on Apple Podcasts. Once you hit send on your review, it takes sometimes, up to 48 hours, 72 hours for the platform to actually publish your review. So before you actually hit send, go ahead and make sure you screenshot it so that you have that screen grab and you're not waiting days before you can find your review actually show up on that podcast show's page. So go ahead and screenshot your review and rating and attach it to your podcast pitch, and do this for every single show that you want to be on. Because here's the thing, it shows that not only are you, someone who has actually done your research and has clearly listened into the show that you want to be on. You'd also be surprised how many people pitch to be on shows that they have never tuned into an episode on. And so therefore they have no idea really if their area of expertise or their pitch idea or their content will even resonate with the listeners, right? So super important to actually listen to the shows that you want to be on so that you can really make sure that your pitch is effective and tailored towards that audience, which I show you exactly how to do that in a really easy way inside the template that I've created for you. But with this super simple tip of attaching a screenshot of your review to your pitch, it's also showing that you are leading with generous action. Tip number 2 is from Mattie James, episode 189. 3 strategies that made $3 million over 3 years. The business of being an influencer. Mattie, number 2 that you implemented in your business that helped you get to 3 million in revenue is you started actually pitching brands instead of waiting only for inbound requests. So I want to know, how do you approach cold pitching? What is the structure of your first interaction with a brand, your first outbound email to them? And as a follow-up to that, what is the action that you are hoping for at the end of that first email? Meaning, for example, let's say cold pitch a potential brand that we want to partner with. Typically, the first action that we are hoping to get from that conversation is just to gauge if they're open to exploring collaboration opportunities with us. Sometimes that looks like them just giving a verbal consent for us to send over more information. Sometimes it's to book a call so that we can get on the phone and have that initial conversation. That's how we approach it, but I'm sure there's lots of different ways to approach that. So for you, what is that initial driving action that you want from them based on the first email?
So I'm not sure if anybody here or anybody listening is familiar with Russell Brunson's books. I think I have it. I'm like literally looking at my library, but he has like the secret series. So expertseries.com series. And there's one more series. I can't think of it off of the
Traffic Secrets.
Traffic Secrets. Yeah. I think I read Traffic Secrets, and he talks about the Dream 100, and he talks about just like the 100 people you want to connect with and collaborate with. And those are the people you should actually really pay attention to online. So we made our own list called the Magic 100,
Ooh,
and
on brand.
it's yeah. And we actually did that for brand, and we used the people version to a live series called Magic Makers as I was promoting my book, and then we did it a brand version, and that's who we decided to reach out to. And we just got kind of granular with it. We were just like, okay, who's this brand? Do we have an existing relationship with them? Again, because of how long I've been doing this, I think it was about 50-50. 50% of it was cold, 50% of it was warm. And I think that was a real huge advantage. And again, I think you also have to pay attention to what your advantage is and lean into that. A lot of times we always want to play from a disadvantage to kind of justify if something doesn't work. And it's like, no, boo boo, figure out what you're winning in and go win the championship ring. Let's do that. And so we just made a spreadsheet. So if we did have a contact, we wrote the contacts, their information and their name, because we wanted to address them by name. We looked at past press releases to see what was like their focus. And then we would put what the focus in the pitch would be, right? So if we knew that they had an upcoming collection or a launch coming up and stuff like that, then that's what we would actually personalize within the pitch and the outreach. And then out of that as well, this is so good because I really don't really talk about a lot of this stuff outside of Pitch Please. Outside of the specific thing we wanted to point to, then we wrote like an alignment point, like how is the Mattie James brand aligned with what matters to them? Because also you can't really fake that, right? Like the whole, hey, would love to see if you want to work together. And it's like, if I say, hey, Ellen, love Cubicle to CEO podcast, and I know that the last 3 episodes have really been focused on influencers, and we have an influencer. See, so if it's like that, then that level of attention to detail actually shows that I'm paying you attention. And so you actually care because I'm coming from a point where I am revealing to you that I specifically care about what you're doing versus just vaguely trying to make something happen.
Yes.
So we approach it like that. I have a wonderful brand manager. Chrissy has been with me longer than anybody on my team. And we just collaborate. We're like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, and then we also think about like pretty much the whole year of content for the site planned out. So we theme out each month. So I'm like, okay, if we're focusing on organization, is there an opportunity or what does Container Store have going on in the month that we're launching that? And don't we have a contact from there? And then we just start connecting the dots. It's like CSI, and we start pinboarding everything. And we're like, what's going on? And I do think it has to be that granular. I think one, it's certainly easier in a lot of ways, but it's certainly easier if you have a team that can help you do that. So I'm really fortunate because I have to create the content. So I have somebody who's literally dedicated to doing that part for me. But I will say, like, if you're a solopreneur or you're figuring it out, just create like a PR email account from you and just like run it from like your PR or like your marketing account, just so it feels a little bit more pointed. You know what I mean? Because when it comes straight from the creator, I get it. Like brands and agencies can kind of act weird or whatever. But if they see like that you have like a dedicated PR, a dedicated marketing, even if it's just still you know what I mean? And it's just like, hey, PR, at cubicle2ceo.com, then it's like, oh, okay, this is the PR inbox. So they must be serious about whatever they are talking about. And I think that was one of the biggest things for me that I did early on. I just had a PR I think it was PR at mattiejames.com. Have never had a publicist. Have never had a publicist. And I wasn't acting like I was a publicist, but it was just like, it would just say like Mattie James PR in your inbox whenever I reached out and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
now we've gotten a little bit more pointed about the outreach and just doing research, literally looking for current press releases, old press releases, literally paying attention to the news, things like, Women's Wear Daily or, anything, essence.com, just like paying attention to what's going on in niches and categories that matter to me. Also paying attention to either conferences I want to attend or speak at, events, whether it's South by Southwest, whether it's the Oscars, whether it's the NAACP Image Awards, whatever it is. It's like, what are we paying attention to? What do they have going on? But it does require you to pay attention. And sometimes it is just like creating a reminder in your calendar to go review what's going on for Essence Fest or what's going on for the VMAs, whatever it is that matters to you. So that's pretty much how we did that. We just kind of made a magic 100 list, kind of filled out a spreadsheet with details and just kind of took it from there. Our first point is usually like, can we get on the phone? Like we're usually pretty specific. in the initial email. We won't send like my press kit or anything like that without permission. But usually I'm like, if I can get you on the phone, I can get you to like me. So my goal is just to get you on the phone.
Tip number 3 is from Pauleanna Reid, episode 201. Stuck at 6 figures? Key changes that scaled this agency from 6 to 7 figures.
At the top of our interview, we mentioned that I was in the lobby of a building, bing, bing, bap, like I landed the deal. But I also think what is really important is patience. So, one of my mentors connected me to a woman who I've been wanting to work with for a very long time. And I had emailed her consistently for a year and 3 months. Okay. And after a year and three
Wow.
months, she finally agreed to meet with me. And we met at Soho House in Toronto. And she said, "You are the most persistent person I've ever met. You remind me of myself." And she said, "Send me the invoice. I'll make sure you're financially taken care of." I think it's really important to let people know that sometimes you'll close the deal right away. Sometimes it requires nurturing for several weeks, months, maybe even years. So send the text, send the email, right? Like, I think people are just afraid to ask for the business. I think people are also, sometimes you can move too quickly that you'll miss clues. Right. So I think, we've all heard the saying success leaves clues. So, like, I could listen to a 1 hour talk, for instance, one of the former CEOs of Soul Cycle. I could listen to a 1 hour talk. I'm obsessed with watching them on YouTube. And she had mentioned something about not being good at English. Automatically, I'm like, okay, we got to get in touch with her. You know what I mean? Like, I look out for clues in interviews. I look out for clues in social captions and in videos. And there are times where I may cold approach someone's team and explore the idea of what it could look like to work together. And honestly, look in your phone. I'm like an old school door to door salesman. I love just looking in my phone. I looked in my contact. When it comes to networking, oh, I don't like that word, but for the sake of the interview, when it comes to networking and building relationships with people, I have a spreadsheet. I'm very intentional, right? So my spreadsheet consists of the basics, so name, company, your email. And then I also have columns for when was the last time we touched base? What did I learn from that conversation so I can personalize the next one? Column for whether or not you're a hot, warm, or cold lead, and a column for whether or not you are a high or low priority. When I was an executive assistant, my CEO and president bosses, 80% of the time, they were in meetings, flying around the world, having dinners, having coffees, building relationships, and they would bring home the business. A lot of the deals that I have attained, so whether it was writing for the CMO at BET, writing for one of the presidents at Disney, writing a script for one of the hosts at The View. Like, it's been really interesting. Those have come through just organic conversation, touching base with people. A text to say what's up goes a very long way. It doesn't even always have to be a Zoom meeting. Sometimes I'll just leave a note in the subject line: "Hey, girl, thinking about you. Let's touch base soon." Right? Like, you don't overthink the process, but I think most people are just unorganized when it comes to managing their contact list. Don't ever assume that your friends know what you do. My capabilities deck, oh, that's another tool that was really important. My capabilities deck has been a phenomenal tool. Most busy people, they're not trying to scroll through a website. I'm sorry. Most busy people, they like the deck because they can easily circulate it, they can easily skim it. And that has landed me a ton of deals as well.
I love that you're so diligent about noticing opportunity. I think that in and of itself is a
Yeah.
huge talent. So many people miss incredible opportunities because they discount either the thing in front of them themselves, or they're just not paying attention. And the fact that you take note of those little details. I mean, I would challenge each of you to approach your next week of work with Pollyanna's mindset and look for clues that point to people maybe silently asking or even screaming for help that you're not noticing, and take the initiative to reach out and say, "Hey, I noticed that you said this or you mentioned this or this happened to you, and I would love to whatever it is. I would love to connect with you. I would love to tell you about this thing. I would love to help you with whatever it is." So that was nugget number 1. Nugget number 2 that I feel I want to actually get more details on is that one woman that you emailed for 1 year and 3 months.
Yeah.
Persistence, right? That persistence game. Tell us, how did you repeatedly email this woman without, for lack of a better word, annoying her? What were those reach outs like? Were you just constantly being like, "Hey, thinking of you, touching base," or did each interaction look a little bit different, and how did you pace that? How did you decide what to say each time so it felt different to her?
That's an excellent question. Reducing stress and adding value. So I was keenly interested in her career. I'd follow her on social media. I'd read the captions. I was locked in. And so there was a post one day, just to give you one example, there was a post where she was talking about her desire to do more public speaking. And so there are times where I'd email her and I would include a link to a conference that she could apply to, or I would give her feedback on some of the video content because I've been a public speaker since 2012. I give her feedback on how she can approach opportunities. I make a suggestion, maybe you should consider designing and making a media kit. So it's a snapshot of your zone of genius. So reducing stress and adding value is how I've been able to get into any room.
Tip number 4 is from Sandra Chow, episode 176. 5x your prices and book out your calendar with dream clients by using this creative director's visual strategy. The last piece, the client proposal, like what is an example of a visual strategy that you implemented there?
Yeah, so with my proposals, obviously you've got sort of the information and the pricing. I always add a visual next to it, like some kind of image. So if I'm pitching to a, I don't know, jewelry brand or something like that, I will make sure the images that I actually select are images that would probably, relate to the brand or resonate with them, that kind of lifestyle element. So I might put some images of, models in kind of a lifestyle setting or with like jewelry or something like that. If I was then using the same proposal for, let's just say, a graphic designer or something like that, then I would actually be looking at changing those images out so that they would be visuals that might speak to a graphic designer. So perhaps it could even be like product photography that shows a logo and packaging design really well. I always just make sure that I change the visuals and I don't just put something there that looks really good, because there's a lot that you can put on in your proposal, but I try to make sure that, the photos still speak to that person that I'm pitching to, and that it kind of makes them think like, or imagine like, okay, if Sandra was doing this for me, this is kind of what I'm going to get, or this is kind of what we can do as well. And I like to do like a little mood board as well too, so that they have an understanding of my understanding of their brand. And then I feel like that usually convert pretty well for me when I've sort of taken that time to be very strategic and thoughtful, I think, in my proposal. And I think sometimes those little details make all the difference.
Absolutely. My big takeaway from you is honestly, I've never really thought to pair visuals with a proposal. I don't know why. I mean, if it was for like an event sponsorship, let's say in my brand deck, I might include some visuals, but most of the time I'm not including visuals with my proposal. It's really just like an outline of, here's the bulleted list of what we can cover. But it's so smart. You're right. Like even if the work that you do may not necessarily be visual in nature, where you have a ready-made portfolio to pull from, I'm sure you could still find perhaps stock images that, again, emote a certain feeling that you want your client to have and pair it with a written proposal. So that's a huge takeaway in and of itself. Tip number 5 is from Hannah Murphy, episode 145. Creating a 5-hour work week while growing from 3 to 27 retainer clients in 6 months.
Yeah, so referral programs definitely were huge. They were a key part of it. But another key part where I got a lot of the clients that eventually became a referral partner was pitching. I actually literally cold pitched clients. I would look them up on Instagram, think, wow, they'd be amazing to work for, and would craft an email and pitch it. And that definitely was, especially the first, like I would say half of those clients came from pitches. And I got so nervous every time I was about to hit send, and just often would cringe at me having to do it, but it worked and it was helpful. And that's how I got so many dreamy clients, and also how I then was able to turn those dreamy clients to get more dreamy clients from a referral program. So those were my top 2.
I love that you said that because I think cold pitching gets such a bad rap, because I think so many people do it wrong. And they're like anything, right? Like any strategy, there's always a way to do something that is of service and a way to do something that is aggressive and pushy and, all these different things. And, I've been on the receiving end of both types of pitches. I've gotten pitches before in my inbox for a service that I may not have necessarily needed at the moment, but it really made me pause and think, wow, this is a great solution. If I was in need of this right now, I would totally hire this person versus, other pitches that just go straight to spam. Tip number 6 is from Kelly Moser, episode 164. Set up a strategic podcast guesting tour that will 4x your weekly audience reach and double your launch revenue. You're actually, I guess, pitching for these shows. What are some of the metrics or KPIs that you're looking at on your side to determine whether or not a show that you're pitching is the right one to pitch? For example, do you look at their ratings and reviews? Do you, I'm assuming, listen to some of their content? What other particular KPIs are you looking for to determine whether A, the show is an aligned fit, but B, it's also a worthwhile use of your time to pitch that show and try to get on it?
So important. The first thing that I would recommend, and this seems so simple, read the show description. Does it sound like the show description that the host likely wrote is something that would apply to your ideal clients, customers, members? If it is, that's a green flag. It's not necessarily a go for you. You also then have to look through the episodes and make sure that you have something of value to add. Because if you don't, the host isn't going to say, please come on the show. So that's number one, that's a very, very simple, almost zero lift step that you need to take. Look on their Instagram, see what kinds of people are following along, see what kinds of people they're following. That also can tell you a lot about the ethos of the show, who they look up to, who they admire, what shows they're listening to. And then as far as making sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, if you are going to go through all this effort to pitch and bring your value to the show, I really love the resource Listen Notes. It's a free website. It's essentially a podcast database, search engine rather, and you can type in the name of the show and it will tell you where that podcast ranks globally. Now, I'm not one for vanity metrics. I love that the podcast world doesn't really lay all that out on the table. You can't necessarily see exactly how many subscribers a podcast has. But I would recommend, for the purposes of your show, if you are really looking, or for the purposes of your tour rather, if you're looking to really drive conversion, to get in front of new audiences, I would shoot for shows that say they're in the top 10% of shows worldwide. And that might seem like a really small number of shows, but it's actually quite a few shows. You will absolutely find podcasts, whether you are just starting out in your business, whether you are a seasoned 8-figure CEO, you will find shows within the top 10% of all the shows globally ranked that will be so happy to have you if your pitch is super strategic and you lead with reciprocity, as you mentioned. And of course, read the reviews, read the ratings, look at the ratings for the show, see what it is about the show that people love, because you will find so many good nuggets in those ratings and those reviews. If people, for example, say, I love how every episode has 3 tangible takeaways for me. Great. That's going to inform how you show up to that show, what kind of content you bring, and how you pitch yourself to. So just look for those little clues from the audience that's already engaged to make sure that you are not changing how you would show up, but making sure that if there is some customization that you want to do to your pitch and how you show up to the show, that you are accounting for that.
Tip number 7 is from Kim Lewis, episode 167. After rejecting a Shark Tank investment, she raised $1 million in 4 hours through this crowdfunding strategy.
I was trying to get press to cover it. Nobody would cover it. And then I went back and learned how to actually pitch journalists. Like, it's not just like, I'm going to throw up and put everything in your inbox that I want you to know about my brand and what I'm launching, because nobody cares. They care about getting eyeballs for them. Is this going to get them clicks? Is this going to get them shares? Is this going to be newsworthy? Because that's what their boss cares about. So I ended up learning how to write copy for a good headline, basically putting it in the subject heading. And then I read the hardest part about pitching journalists is rereading their previous work. You don't want to send them something and you've never read anything that they've written before. So I had to go back and I would use this app called BuzzSumo, where I could type in like my category, like DIY hair care, and then see what the top articles in that in the last 12 months. And you want to do like the last 6 months, really, because people switch jobs a lot in journalism. And then I found, okay, Refinery 29, Jessica from Refinery 29. Let me read her work. Read an article about DIY masking, DIY oils, DIY this. So then when I'm actually pitching her, I can say, hey, Jessica, I read your article on DIY oil, DIY mask, and I think you would love to write about our DIY subscription box. So the first one for curly hair, we already have Nikki May or Natural Chica on board. She's going to be our first box, and Hey Friend Hey for our second one, which I paid for. And I think it's going to attract this kind of attention. I think you would love to cover it. Everyone else had told me no, but Jessica from Refinery 29 told me yes. And then when she said yes, I went back to Essence, back to Ebony, back to, I was replacing, hey, Refinery 29 is covering our launch. We'd hate for you to miss out. And then we got like 7 people PR articles to cover it when we launched, right? And we sold 100 boxes that first day. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is how you launch. Like, I feel like I had unlocked something. I was like, this is it.
Notice, and I'm sure you guys caught this, but just for those of you who didn't quite catch this, I want you to put this down. The people that said no to Kim, right? She went back and said, wait a second, now I have somebody on board to do this article and I don't want you to miss out. Oh my gosh, the power of that FOMO saying, look, I know you said no, but I want to give you one more chance because now we have validity and credibility on our side with a big fish, right? So keep in mind when you're going out there pitching yourself, if you get 100 no's, you really just need that one yes. So keep believing in what it is that you're doing. And like Kim said, manufacture that momentum, whatever it looks like, whoever you think you had the best shot at getting that first yes from, whether it's your loyal customers, whether it's, your cousin who's like, I will buy your DIY box because I love you. Like whatever that looks like, go to the person or go to the group of people who you think are going to invest first and then use them to piggyback, right? It's like a constant piggyback effect. Tip number 8 is from Doone Roisin, episode 172. Pitch without social proof. She secured a $25,000 sponsorship for a newly launched podcast. This sponsor that came to you, was this a sponsor that you pitched and had a previous relationship with, or was this a cold pitch? Was this an inbound relationship? Give us a little bit of the background there.
Definitely a cold pitch. I did not have any relationship to this company. I'd never worked with them before. I didn't have a contact, nothing like that. So my approach was, as with everything in business, creating a list, work through the list. So I created a list of people who, really suited the audience that I was going after, who kind of would add value to my audience, but also value to me. I was also thinking tech businesses. Tech businesses have budget for podcasts. I was looking at other podcasts in the space to see who was advertising at the time to understand who has budget for the podcast advertising. And so I made a list and I put together a template explaining my vision and started sending out to that list. And, spreadsheet, classic spreadsheet, name, company, website, who's the contact, if there's no contact form, link, that kind of stuff. And funnily enough, this particular deal, I just sent off a quick message on a contact form. I didn't know who it was going to. I didn't know if it was going to be read by anyone. And I just really simply explained my vision, what I was looking for. And I wasn't pitching a certain deal or anything in that message. It was actually just to get on a call. The sell was, let's get on a call and chat and see what we can do. Because as I mentioned, I was looking for sponsorship, but I was also looking for distribution partners. So if someone could come to me and be like, yep, great, you can create content and we'll distribute it to our email list or our website or whatever it might be and give you backlinks, that was great for me. I was really interested in that. So I had no particular pitch specifically other than let's get on a call. And I went to bed. I woke up the next day, 10 hours later, I have an email being like, hey, yeah, let's get on a call. And of course, there's a little bit of right place, right time that plays into these things. You have to work hard, you have to plan, you have to have strategy, but also right place, right time. For this particular brand, they were looking specifically for partners in exactly the industry that I was doing. They wanted more female founded voices. And so it was just the right time, and we were able to get on a call. We nutted out all the details, and then eventually we landed on a deal for $25,000. And that is really what gave me the confidence to be like, okay, this is something, there's interest here. This is a signal for me to pursue this, and I can hire my editor and we can get cracking. We can go to the races.
Yeah, you really, went off to the races with a really strong start. But to your point, there was a lot of preparation and work that you had already put into the show by that point, even though you had not yet reached your 100 episodes. You had just set that goal, but the podcast itself had already been around for a couple months. And I really want to reemphasize what you said about how your approach was not to pitch a company, hey, I have this package for this amount of money. Would you be interested? Yes or no, right? It was really selling them on let's have a conversation. And I think that piece, leading with curiosity and being willing to come to the table and say, here's what I have to offer. Let's hear about what you are interested in and how we can mutually support those goals, and then figure out what that might look like from there. And I really appreciate that you said whether it ended up being a monetary sponsorship or whether the value ended up being that they could distribute your content to their audience, both were valuable to you, right? And you didn't know going in which it would be, but I think that the way that you approached it was so smart, and so many people can learn from that, as well as to lead with that curiosity. And I think there's no better setting to have a sales or collaboration conversation than on a call. I just think email can't quite replicate that. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think another thing I'd like to add is like on these calls, you also want to find out if they're the right partner for you. You need to, it's like an interview. You need to interview back. You need to find out if it's an alignment, if actually what their KPIs and their goals and what they're working for in that quarter or in that month or whatever it might be actually aligns with you, so you can both get the best value out of the deal. And so always now when I approach partnerships and sponsor deals and things like that, it's about understanding that person's KPIs and whatever the company goals are at that time.
Tip number 9 is from Julie Solomon, episode 103, How to Pivot, Pitch Like a Pro, and Find Your Purpose. Pitching is really a timeless skill. It is not something that, it's not like here today, gone tomorrow with Instagram algorithm changes or something trendy. It really is a universal skill that applies even beyond business. And so I would just like to kind of talk about that a little bit. What do you feel like is, or maybe not is, but what are some of the myths around pitching, and why do you believe in the power of putting yourself out there?
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that about how, there's a difference between kind of the gimmicky, trendy things that people jump on versus the things that are truly timeless. And that's why, I've said it from the beginning and I'll always say it. The work that I do and the work that I teach and it's always foundational, no matter what. And pitching and marketing is one of those foundations. It's how we connect with the world. It's like the weather, right? It's like it's part of our life. It's like the air that we breathe. And whether you are in the workforce, whether you are a mom, whether you're a student, no matter who you are pitching all the time, whether you realize it or not. I mean, we're always pitching last night I was pitching my husband on what we should have for dinner. What movie should we watch? What schools should we, look into, or summer camp should we look in for our kids to go to? When you're talking to a potential, person that you want to do business with, you've got to always tout yourself and pitch yourself and show up. And so it really is this timeless foundational skill set that I truly believe is the foundation of a lot of not only how we communicate in this world, but how we really grow and live our best lives. And, throughout my journey, not only have I been able to pitch for, a ton of clients, a ton of authors. Back when I was consulting, I was, pitching and landing media for a lot of my clients, pitching and landing brand deals for a lot of my clients. But, I've been able to, every week I have to pitch someone to come on my show to be a guest. I had to pitch to get a book deal. I had to pitch students all the time to join forces with me. And why am I the perfect fit for what it is that they need? And so that was really the idea that I knew that I needed to do something that was truly evergreen. And it didn't matter what time, it didn't matter what social media platform was hot at the moment. None of that mattered, as the foundations would always stay the same. So pitching is really that specific skill set that I think anyone needs to show up and be successful. And a reason why a lot of people aren't really good at pitching really comes down to a few things. They have these false beliefs about pitching, these limited, if you will, blocks that they create. So they actually don't show up and pitch. They lack the confidence to pitch, or they lack the know-how. And that's really the 3 key points as to what keeps someone from pitching.
That totally makes sense. And it's so interesting, what you described about how pitching really, it's just a matter of influence, right? Which is, again, I think probably what inspired your podcast, the Influencer Podcast. It's how you use your perspective, skills, knowledge, experience to influence someone else's decision or choices, whatever that may be. And so if you could give like 3 key tips that people should keep in mind when pitching, what would those be?
First, it is you have to know who it is that not only that you are talking to, that you're pitching, but what is their pain point. And so the way that I share this and teach this to my students, I call it the spotlight method. I think the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is that they will go and let's say that you want to get on Good Morning America. And so you start pitching the producer of Good Morning America, and all you do is talk about yourself. I'm this, I'm that, this is what I can do, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to talk about, this is what I want to promote. And you make it all about you instead of about them and what solution are you providing for them. So I call it the spotlight method, meaning instead of putting the spotlight on yourself, you actually put the spotlight on the person that you're pitching. And so you have to talk about what is it that they're looking for? What are their pain points? What are their challenges? And how does your service, your expertise, your perspective, your background, your experience, whatever that is for you, how does that provide a solution for that? And so that is the first thing, that a lot of people make it about themselves. And the second challenge I see is that they don't do proper research to know what those pain points are, to then be able to properly pitch and land what it is that they're wanting.
That's so good. I could not agree more with this concept. We call it something different, but same idea of leading with generous action and really making sure that you're constantly keeping what's in it for them at the forefront of your mind. And you're leading with that rather than leading with your story, which is not to say that your story is not important, but I think that a lot of people have been taught, your story is what makes you unique. So always lead with that. But I feel like in the context of pitching, your story needs to come second to the relevance of what is being discussed, right?
Yep. I would agree. That's a really good one. And then one specifically that I see when it comes to this kind of, a lot of people that may be listening to this, maybe they're bloggers, content creators, influencers, and they're wanting to partner with brands, or they're wanting to, do influencer marketing on a social media platform. They're wanting to pitch and land brand deals. A lot of times what keeps them from actually doing it, and I'd kind of mentioned that they'll either create this myth in their head that they have to have a certain amount of followers in order to pitch and land brand deals, which is completely not true. Inside Pitch It Perfect, we have students with, 300 followers that are pitching and landing brand deals and making actual money, not just like, hey, I got this t-shirt as a gift, but they're putting money in their pocket and in their bank account. I think that that's a big one. And I think that also perfectionism is another one. Perfectionism is such an easy tool to use. So you can kind of see and find out what's like going wrong in the world that you can basically fall victim to. And so when you use these excuses of like, oh, well, I'm not enough, or I have to wait for the right and perfect time for XYZ to fall in place. And then once that happens, then I'll be ready to pitch, and then I can get brand deals, and then I can make money. When really it is the act of doing that creates all of those things that get you the results that you're wanting. And so instead of who I really see being the most successful at pitching really anything that they want are the people that don't wait for everything to fall into place, because it's not about what they need to have today, but it's who they need to be. And so it's really about emulating the mindset of, a person who is successful at pitching, a person who is landing media, who is getting all the clients that they want, who is able to show up on a webinar or on a YouTube video and sell their services with confidence. How does that person think? That's the type of person that I need to be today. And so those are some other examples of some issues that people could have, and then how to overcome those.
And finally, tip number 10 is with myself again. In bonus episode number 8, is cold pitching dead? When possible, this one is huge. This one I think actually makes the biggest difference for me in the initial pitch, at least in terms of my willingness to respond, is when possible, provide value up front. So anytime you can use the initial pitch as a platform to showcase your skill sets or your service in real time, to actually show what it looks like applied to that potential client's business or life, the more likely that person is actually going to want to respond to you, right? It's like giving them a sample, like when you're walking through Costco, like, I don't know how many of you are Costco members, but I remember as a kid, I loved going to Costco on Saturdays because they would have all of those sample booths where you could walk around and just like fill up on all these, little samples for different foods and brands. And it was so much fun. think of your pitch email as a sample of, how could I include some sort of value add into this email where I can give a little sampling of what our capabilities are and kind of show it as a proof of concept, but also how can I leave someone with more than what they came in with, right? Like, how can I ensure that when someone opens my email and reads this thing, that regardless of whether they choose to invest their dollars or their time with me, they leave this interaction better off than they came into it, right? It's that philosophy that I always talk to you guys about in leading with generous action. Anytime you can give before you ask, you are always going to have a better chance at starting a relationship with someone. And so I saw this done really well recently when a video agency actually pitched me on this particular service, but they were the ones that I'm talking about. They were the only ones that actually did this extra step of adding in value, which is they are a video agency that specializes in helping podcasters or people who create long form content clip up that content into short form videos to repurpose across YouTube Shorts, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And their whole goal, of course, is to use these short form content pieces as discoverability channels to bring people back to your podcast, to create mini viral content that attracts in new listeners, et cetera, et cetera. So the proposition, of course, made instant sense to me because this is my space. They obviously did their research. They understand our product and what we're working on as a company. But what I loved is that they actually attached to the email 2 video examples that they had created for us off of our existing content. So they actually went through and, pulled clips, both B-roll video clips as well as audio clips from recent episodes. And they put together 2 samples of what they would actually produce for us if we were a client. So we could get a sense of their editing style, their capabilities, their skills. And then here's the generous part, right? They said, hey, go ahead and use these. If you enjoy this content, please go ahead and share this to your social. Like, they didn't ask for any tags or credits or anything. They were like, just utilize it and let's see how your audience responds, right? If they seem to enjoy this content, then maybe that's a good sign that we could work together and create even more of this. But let's just test it out for you. It's no risk. It's our free gift to you. Like, here are these 2 videos that we created for you that you can use as you please, whether or not you choose to end up working with us. And I really loved that value give because it allowed me to, again, see their work in action, but also test it with my own audience and see, is this a viable thing that my audience would actually enjoy? And then would it make sense for me to invest in a service like this or outsource a piece of our content creation in this way to an agency? Let us know which pitching tip you're going to try. And if you enjoy this episode, make sure you come back next week for our Roundup series featuring the best of lead generation tips.